Hello, everyone, and welcome to Supermoon Station. Today, we're running podcast from our production house, our Supermoon Station in Austin, Texas, during Consensus. And we have a very special guest, Clara Tsao, from Filecoin Foundation. And Clara, let's start with a little bit of background, but I want to know something more interesting and inspirational. Why you joined crypto space, what led you to Filecoin Foundation, and maybe something like special, interesting that other people don't know about you and crypto space.
Yeah, happy to. So I was very fortunate when I was growing up to really know what I wanted to do with my life at a very young age, even though I didn't quite figure out the pieces. So there's a saying by Mark Twain who once said, there are two most important moments of your life, the day you're born and the day you realize why. And for me, growing up, I really wanted to solve inequality in the world, which is such a big problem. And I really felt like technology was the means to really get there. And so throughout my life, I've been working in technology to really think about how we can equalize and use technology to solve some of humanity's hardest information. The reality is today, most of big tech and most of information that we access on the web is actually very centralized in the hands of huge powers. In fact, I can name 4 companies that own the world's most information, with one hand: Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and then Facebook or Meta. And so what we're trying to do at Filecoin and why the Filecoin mission is so important for me personally is we want to be able to make sure that the biggest currency of our time, which is not Filecoin but data as a currency, can be something that is in the hands of people rather than large monopolies. And it doesn't matter which way you think or cut it. Facebook might be free to use, but at the end of the day, their business model is off of monetizing user data. And what we're trying to do with Filecoin, with IPFS, with our technology, and our entire community is working with us around this, is to make sure that we can distribute the most important part of the internet, data, in a way where if data today is a utility, which it already has become, if I were to, let's just say, throw that camera filming me into a pool or throw your phone into a pool, you would lose all that data. And people 40 years ago probably wouldn't pay for storing data as much as they would today, especially old photos of themselves, or it could be documents from previous work they've done. So we're seeing more and more of how important data is, but if a large monopoly today were to jack up the price of data to store something, if AWS today were to increase their price 3 or 4 times, there's a lot of creators, a lot of entrepreneurs that wouldn't be able to survive. And that's the downside of an economy that's built off of large monopolies. What we're trying to do is we have 4,000 entrepreneurs all around the world that are running their own data centers. And we've created a network of available storage that makes our capacity to store data, especially archival data and large data sets, around 1/100th the cost of Amazon. And we're also seeing, just last fall, a lot more enterprises being passionate about this too, because they don't want their data to be lost. They don't want, if a bomb were to hit a data center in a centralized storage provider like AWS, they would lose all their data with that. With a distributed data storage network like ours, there is no downtime. And so for me, that's why it's so important, because there are so many moments where people rely on data, whether that's court cases where they need to find something online, whether that is critical information, whether that's even, just direction somewhere. It's so important to be able to access it and around the clock. And unfortunately, it's so fragile today to find resilience in data. So that's what our community and our network is solving. And that's why IPFS and Filecoin are so important to me. So
I can relate to it so much. I actually remember like a year ago, I'm a huge data, I have a huge data paranoia. So I'm trying to do a lot of our different backups, but it's not always possible because when you work with a large amount of data, especially when it comes to production, it's of course more complicated and time consuming. And I remember a year ago, I'm opening a Google Drive that we're still forced to use because there is no yet better and easier alternative. And I'm really glad to hear that Filecoin is actually actually providing this alternative. And we've been looking into Filecoin for a long time to start using and storing our data there. But a year ago, I opened the Google Drive, and I see that the website is down.
Yeah.
The website is down. I was asking a few teammates. Of course, they recovered it within like 5 or 7 minutes. But for this 5 or 7 minutes, I would say it was like the longest 5 or 7 minutes. Because I was like, no, all the files are gone? Like, what I'm going to do? And at that moment, I started realizing that, yes, it's actually real. We cannot rely on the big corporations. We cannot just assume that, oh, Google has so much money, so much backing, they will always be there. What if not? And then we have a crypto space when people are saying, oh, we're so decentralized. Oh, we're so decentralized, right? And then you're asking, hey, where are majority of master nodes are being hosted? Where? AWS. So if tomorrow US government says, okay, crypto is completely illegal, what's going to happen? AWS will start shutting down all these companies, all their servers, and then they're not only decentralized, they're just gone. So I think decentralization became a buzzword. And Clara, what do you think we can do to improve it? How can we raise awareness of what decentralization actually is?
Yeah, I think there's so many ways to teach people more about decentralization. And we all learned this for those that were impacted by the latest banking crisis with Silicon Valley Bank, right? It doesn't help to put all your eggs in one bucket, because if things fail, there will be single points of failure. Everything goes down with it. And what's so great about, like I said, our network of 4,000 storage providers is we have data centers all around the world that we don't control, but entrepreneurs are trying to upkeep. Just like Airbnb hosts. It's hard to get rid of Airbnb because there are hosts around the world that are making the community even better than a centralized hotel chain, right? And you get a lot more diversity around people who might be running huge Airbnb operations or those that might be a mom and pop shop. And we have storage providers all around the globe. For me, I think we're so privileged being here and also being here in the US because a lot of the use cases of our technology are in places of the world where internet is not a fundamental human right. And so a couple of examples include a few years ago, the Turkish government decided to take down Wikipedia because they wanted to control what people could access online. And people were able to back up a copy of Wikipedia in Turkey on IPFS. And that's a lot of these instances where we want to make sure that it's not just storing data for enterprises or startups or production. It's also how can we use this technology in a way that can really help instances where blockchain really thrives. Another example is, as you guys know, there is a lot of testimonies from what happened in the Holocaust that are being lost over time because the Holocaust survivors are dying off. And we are working with an amazing group at Stanford University called Sterling Lab, where we uploaded 50,000 testimonials of these Holocaust survivors so that one day people can look at these moments in time and can always remember that nothing like the Holocaust should ever happen again in this world. So we are always experimenting, but I think that's the story behind decentralization, for me at least, is we want to make sure that we can have the internet be a resilient place where people can access information and people can also know how to diversify not only their bank accounts after Silicon Valley Bank, but also their data.
And I think it's also diversifying the knowledge because history is written by winners. So whenever we have a historic event and now we're trying to look into books, they're written by one side and it's always one side of a story. And I think people also are forgetting that there's always another side and there's another perspective. And I think that's actually a very interesting use case because next generation will be able to access information from different angles. They'll have more awareness of what was happening now and not only a story that's being told or put on them by government or institutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually every year have a huge presence at Davos at the World Economic Forum where we rent out a church. And people might wonder why a church? Why is a church so important? It actually tells the story of decentralization very well because the first place where most people went for knowledge was a church. And then Gutenberg came out with a printing press, and people could write their own versions of knowledge, right? So if we even remove the internet, when the printing press came about, they had so many versions of the Bible, of religion. People were able to see things from different perspectives. It was more and more decentralized. And that's the beauty of the internet today, is people can have versions of information that doesn't have to come from traditional institutions. And people are able to share the voice. When Twitter became, a place that people called a public square for the people, it was because so many perspectives that often aren't represented in the media, people are able to talk about things. And so I think we're seeing more and more of that in all areas of industries. But I think blockchain is a really great way for us to make sure that at the very core, and especially what we're doing, the data layer of incentive structure is not malintentioned, where unfortunately the economic models drive decision making for most companies, even though they could say, we support this or we want to do this. One of the main reasons of why IPFS and Filecoin for me was I used to work in trust and safety and content moderation, and I saw a lot of instances where governments would ask for centralized providers for access to information and just take that down. And sometimes these were human rights instances where they just didn't want people to see particular information on the internet. And we also see a lot of that happening in China as well, for a lot of censorship and a lot of services that people can't access. And so I think it's very hard for us to imagine these moments until we no longer have access. When we can't access the internet, we realize just how valuable it is. I think a lot of people today, they can't live without the internet. They go off a silent retreat, they go to Burning Man, they go to all these spaces, and they realize how dependent they are with knowledge and being able to access knowledge so quickly. So
absolutely, and the interference from centralized institutions and the government is crazy. It's happening everywhere, even in the United States. Actually, specifically in the United States, Twitter is a good example. They had access to all information, even DMs on Twitter. That shouldn't be a case because that's private information. But that's the other case also with the blockchain technology. When you put information, IPFS, so we have a lot of transparency in the information. How do you think we can balance out data protection, privacy, with a transparent and decentralized ledger? How can we achieve privacy, but at the same time decentralization, and have ownership over your data, but not having this data publicly displayed to everyone else on the internet?
Yeah, so I think you're hitting on the point which people call the blockchain trilemma, which at any point in time, it's always a trade-off. I actually would argue there is no perfect way of pure decentralization. There's no perfect way of pure security. But I think depending on the use case, everyone's trying to balance out, how do we have more decentralization? How do we have more security? How do we have better privacy protection? And I think the upside is when we have more decentralization and more privacy, people are able to securely, journalists from all around the world, if they're reporting on instances that are really hard to talk about. We support a lot of journalists from around the world that are doing investigative reporting. We have a nonprofit arm, Filecoin Foundation for the Decentralized Web. And a lot of the work we do there is making sure that we can also use our technology to prove at the point of upload that photograph came from a particular source in a particular time. So if journalists are documenting, whether those are elections or facts online that people might consider to be disinformation, we can use blockchain technology to prove that. And I would say, those are, for me at least, really important moments where you can securely and trustworthily trust information. I think on the data protection side, I think this comes back to what I was talking about with control in the hands of monopolies. Unfortunately, it's really hard to trust what any large company chooses to do with their data. And unfortunately in the US, I'll use Facebook or Meta as an example again. Their business model as companies in the US are to give value back to the shareholder. And the only way that Facebook can continue to give money back is to monetize on their user data, which is why Cambridge Analytica, was not surprising to me or to a lot of people who have been activists in the technology policy sector for a long time. But it was so shocking to the public who thought they were trusting Facebook, using it as a free service. Unfortunately, there is no free lunch, right? They did not realize how much their information was being sold to advertisers. And there is no way you can reorganize Facebook without them having a model to monetize on user data. And that is every business out there. Unfortunately, they have to pay their people. They have a bottom line. But I think the upside to a more decentralized internet, to a lot of decentralized companies building in the blockchain space, is we're also thinking about a new incentive model for us at least. We don't control our storage providers building their own business, but we can give them our technology to leverage. And we will never centralize and own all the data from everyone storing on our network. It's spread out among a ton of people that have built their own configurations for securely being able to store all kinds of data that are coming through. And so I think those are really great examples. The other initiative that I am especially proud of that we started last year is called the Public Data Commons, and also another project called Democracy's Library. And this comes back to the story of today, there are certain people that we want to trust with our data, like more and more governments all around the world are joining the open data movement. They want to open up their data and show it to the public. Unfortunately, we all know that government IT systems are not always the most innovative, and sometimes they're using really outdated technology. And so even if they have this data available, it might go down. And so the state of Maine a few years ago actually lost all of their government data because of an IT system failure. And that included people who relied on this government data for going to court to be able to, resolve lawsuits or other issues. And it interrupted a lot of people's day-to-day of life. I was at a conference with mayors all around the US last fall, and there was a mayor of the second largest city in Mexico who spent most of his campaign being able to showcase how polluted the river, the main river in his town, was. When his term ended, the next mayor took down all that data he opened up because he didn't want to deal with it. And the mayor to follow up had control over that data, right? If someone backed up that data and kept it to the public can still keep that data accountable. And so for us, when we think about Filecoin, when we think about IPFS, when we think about data ownership, we really do believe that data belongs in the hands of people, not monopolies. And a lot of our work in all kind of slices, whether it's our philanthropy work, whether it's our work with governments, is around giving this data and this control back to the users, rather than users feeling helpless or users having to be bribed to be able to get their data back. And every single month, as an example, I pay more and more data storage costs to centralized providers, or I get a notice on my phone to say, pay another $10. You're at capacity on your iPhone, right? And if I really wanted to move out of it, it would be really hard to, because that migration cost today is so high that a lot of people just feel stuck. They have to pay that bill for another 50 years if they want to maintain that data. And we want to say we have other options out there, that people don't have to necessarily rely on, that one way. But I think, unfortunately, that is the reality of technology monopolies today, is they have so much control over people's data that they're really helpless, and they just have to keep paying that bill.
And I really like that you're saying that people are actually trapped, because I do see it as a case. Because people keep paying, they have this data, and no one has that much time to move. Like sometimes we're talking about TBs, we're not even talking about GBs, or when it comes to your data, you have so much footage, photos, or like even unnecessary stuff, but you want to deal with it, you don't want to clean it, you're just moving it to another device and continue paying for centralized storage. And I think the reason people don't want to take extra efforts is lack of understanding why. So I think we're talking a lot about protecting people, but I always say that it's personal responsibility, because no one else should be protecting protecting you. It's your job to protect yourself, learn and take ownership. Only then you will be independent, and only then your decisions will be your decisions and not something that a centralized institution decides to do. People don't realize that data loss is the one part. Like losing data, it's really bad because you cannot do enough research. But there's another side is when there's a data leak. When all your financial data, personal data, your home address, everything that you stored, let's say on Facebook, Meta, on Google, anywhere else, is just being leaked to third parties. Sold is one thing. Sold, there's still, in many places it's illegal. Companies still do it. They pay fine. They go to a court, and we never hear about these lawsuits because they will just end up in a multi-million-dollar settlements that no one cares about because no one is there to protect a user. They just want to get more money. But your data, is being leaked to a third party, so it also means issues with your safety. Because now your home address can be leaked to someone really harmful. So you can be robbed, you can have a home invasion, your data can be stolen, your money can be stolen easily from your bank account. If you're saying it's going to be that protected, no, it's not. And there are so many cases that, of course, are being suppressed by media because no one wants to hear about it because they want to make sure they are in control over data. And it goes above and above because it's not only about centralized institutions, it's also about government, politicians, because they want to stay in power, they want to stay in control. If they don't have this data, they don't have control because this century is all about data because that's the only way you are continue to have and maintain your power. So I think what Filecoin is doing is really important. I still don't know how to raise this awareness. And I think like focusing on individual responsibility is absolutely crucial. But there is also another issue with our companies. Like, for example, if you're running a smaller business and you have a lot of sensitive information, so when it comes really challenging and tricky to use our decentralized storage. I know that we're adding a lot of layers of privacy protection, even ZK is still not advanced enough to fully protect your data. What Filecoin is currently working on that can help also to add maybe an extra layer of privacy or this data protection for companies that run business and do have a sensitive information?
Yeah, so I think there's many ways I can answer that question, but I do want to highlight today we have an exciting event called Founders Day for the 300 startups in our ecosystem, and a lot of them are funded by our sibling companies at Protocol Labs as a venture arm. But we have so many amazing companies and builders in our ecosystem that are thinking exactly to your mind, right? Like we are so much we can offer and build from our side, but we really want our community to also lead the way and have ideas. So we're making a lot of this a lot more accessible and usable. We have startups in our ecosystem that have made, the equivalent of a Google Drive to add that layer for consumers to be more easy in storing their data. We have a company in India called Huddle01 that's building an alternative to Zoom and video data being on decentralized storage, right? And so a lot of people don't trust Zoom for a long time. Some people still don't, right? And some people don't trust video, but during COVID, everyone was using video conferencing software, and they weren't sure who was going to accidentally come into their Zoom line or whether those calls were actually being monitored. And so I think these are very hard questions, and I think for us, our main goal is really in talent, in attracting the smartest people to solve the hardest problems around how can we be at a place where we can do even better and have all the security needs needed for enterprise. So we're right now working a lot with traditional enterprise providers to help them also think about their roadmap and their needs, because they have so many customers downstream that rely on a lot of security and privacy as well. So we can't do this alone. We have an amazing community, and we also have some great startups thinking about that. So I think there's a lot. We also just launched Filecoin Virtual Machine, which brings a layer of storage on smart contracts and a lot more interoperability with other chains. And so we're also looking across the board at other blockchain projects that we can work on, and this really allows us to do even better collaboration with other blockchain projects as well that are thinking about these exact issues.
And I like it because it's, as Filecoin actually saying, giving power back to the community, so decentralizing community and letting them to work through the solutions. What are other ways how people can actually join Filecoin ecosystem? What is the funding opportunities that you guys have? What is maybe mentorship, support, events, or other activations that can help them not only to build, but also scale and accelerate their journey?
Yeah, so we have had a lot of presence at all the major conferences in the blockchain space, and also traditional places like Web Summit. And beyond that, we also, most of our community is virtual. We have a Slack channel that is open to anyone that is interested in learning, and it's so active that I have a hard time keeping track. Our DNA is really builders and developers. That is really, we have some hardcore cryptography researchers. Our crypto econ lab team just hosted a full day event here at Consensus. We have a Filecoin network base, which is 3 stories of different spaces where people can mingle and network. So for us, it's not just offering, technology that people can build on. All of our technology is open source, so you can go on GitHub and you can improve it. But we also want our community to meet each other and build together. And so having a lot of opportunities at hackathons, at spaces like the one we have here, and also having places like accelerators where companies are building on our technology together are all fairly great opportunities. We also run a fully decentralized core team, and so everyone that is part of my team at the Filecoin Foundation, we can work from anywhere. But that also allows us to be in a lot more places. One of my favorite new initiatives that we started around a year and a half ago is a program called Filecoin Orbit, where we have volunteers all around the world that are just really passionate about Filecoin technology, and we help support events or meetups or workshops that they want to host. We give them some framework of an idea of how to get started, but we let them lead the way of who they want to bring, how they want to do it, what they need, and we really do listen to the community. And so Filecoin Orbit was really the way that we were able to reach places like Bangalore. We had an event last fall called Phil Bangalore that we supported, and that was put together in a week and a half, but our community in India got around, I think, 2,000 or 3,000 people registered within a week. And it was just incredible. And that's not something that we could have done standalone with just our team. So I think those are ways to think about not just our technology, but things around building community. We're so much more powerful when we can bring our community along and let them also co-lead in building that trust over time. And it's a lot of experimentation. Not every experiment will succeed. But I think that's the beauty of also other places like ETH Denver. If folks have been to ETH Denver, just seeing the chaos of so many events happening in parallel.
And the Supermoon Tower.
Yeah, and that Supermoon Tower that you were telling me about yesterday. So I think that's great. And I think that the developer community is so great to already work in such an open and collaborative way where anyone can give feedback and improve a project at any point in time. So it's the same concept.
And if someone wants to join Filecoin Orbit as a volunteer, is there any selection criteria? Do they put proposal? How do they join?
Yeah, so you can go on our website, phil.org. We also have, if you just even look up Filecoin Orbit program, it will be probably the first thing that comes up in search. So anyone can join and participate. And we do have a vetting process, but usually we want to hear just very passionate people that love our technology, and we also want to hear ideas from them. In terms of grants and other kinds of funding, the Filecoin Foundation, we give most of the grants in the Filecoin ecosystem, from developer grants to Filecoin Green grants for folks having ideas for how to improve blockchain and the environment. So we give all kinds of funding, and if you just look up Filecoin grants, we have all the instructions on GitHub, and it's really clear. And what's also great is our grant process is all transparent in the public, so everyone knows what got awarded and how much. So we also let our community know why something got awarded. And people can also comment very publicly around, what they agree, what they disagree with. But, it's a great way to get started. And we have also tons of ways to also get involved. We have a program called the Protocol Labs Network, which is a really amazing program with startups and a number of groups building on our community, all getting resources from legal support to being able to have regional meetups. So we really do support everyone in the way that they look for resourcing. Our long-term goal with the Filecoin network is making sure that we can play less and less of a hand in helping coordinate, that the community will self-govern itself. So.
And for sure, we'll be adding all the links so everyone can also click and start learning about these opportunities. And Clara, yesterday we also had a conversation about builders, and you asked me a question: why do we like working with builders? Why builders? And I know that you're also really passionate about builders community. So I want to ask you now the same question: why builders?
Yeah, I think builders are so great because they help create most of what we know of blockchain today. And builders can come in so many forms. Unfortunately, today, only a subset of builders know how to raise money from venture capital and take their idea to the next level. For me, one of my favorite quotes from a friend of mine is pretty simple. It takes one Jobs and one Woz to make one Apple. And I think a lot of what we try to do is take all the crazy technical ideas and help them scale. And I think that's what's so exciting in a place like a hackathon. I started off my career in developer advocacy, and that was over a decade ago, where hackathons were still taking off. But hackathons are microcosms of people just constantly experimenting until seeing what something sticks and what works. And you can, in a very short period in a hackathon, create really great prototypes of something that could be bigger, or test out whether something works or not. And when you build a project out of hackathon, everyone is their own mini entrepreneur. When you launch an app, you have to do your own marketing, you have to think about the audience. And so it's a great way, I think, for also all kinds of people. You don't have to know how to code, but when you can build something, it teaches you so much about how to get an idea out there and how to make it land. So for me personally, I'm very passionate about builders because they are the bread and butter of what we know for most technology companies today. They are what creates a lot of the innovations in the blockchain space. And they are definitely the group that is thriving the most in this time where we're in a bear cycle in the market. They are, continuing to build and sustain their projects and also finding new ways to get adoption. So.
Yeah, builders will continue build,
yeah,
even if it's a bear market. And Clara, I also wanted to touch a little bit more on the data side, because during this session, you also mentioned that you guys are verifying data at the very, very beginning. So if, let's say, a journalist is traveling to maybe a hot location and they're uploading photos, you can verify that this photo was uploaded from that specific location. But what do you think we can do to prevent the fake information being uploaded? Because the verification process from the moment you upload it, for me, is clear. But the entry point for me is really, really unclear, because you can still add fake information. AI now is keep advancing and creating amazing, unbelievable things that human eye cannot recognize. Is there a way, or maybe solution, maybe some of the projects in the Filecoin ecosystem working on this entry point validation on how to actually determine that this data is correct and it's not AI generated photo or maybe a fake information that maybe was taken at the right location, but maybe completely misleading?
Yeah, there's a great startup actually based in Taiwan called Numbers Protocol. And a lot of their work has been exactly on this issue of verifying photos or verifying information and making that accessible to journalists and people that need this the most. I would say from a program standpoint, from the foundation, we have a program called Filecoin Plus that has a number of folk called notaries that are trust members of the community that help validate that there are no bad actors or limited bad actors that are just uploading junk data. Unfortunately, sometimes this happens, and it happens in centralized companies, it happens in decentralized situations like ours, but we definitely want to make sure that we have programs and policies in place that minimize the amount of bad actors there. So Filecoin Plus actually gives a huge incentive to our community to be able to upload trustworthy data and to let that outweigh, the scammers and folks that are trying to, just trying to monetize or find other ways to put data on the network. So.
I like it. And why people participate in the Filecoin Plus? Like just like a regular person who would validate the data, what is their incentive? Why do they want to do it?
So people participate in Filecoin Plus because we are incentivizing them to upload trustworthy data. So that program actually validates. We go through and find a small snippet of data and just validate that is what it says it is, right? So it might be someone trying to upload, the Flickr of China, all the open photos on Flickr, and they have an equivalent of that. And we take a subset of the data that is uploaded, and we have our notaries around the world help determine and validate that the group uploading it is who they are, and also that data is trustworthy and not junk data. But it definitely is challenging. I think the KYC process for a lot of companies, not just in us in data upload, is hard because a lot of ethos in the crypto community is security. People want to maintain security and they want to be anonymous. And so this is one of those dilemmas that people often have to tug of war between. And it's the same with data. Today, I would say it's so hard to identify who someone is online, and we try to find the most effective way to validate without invading people's privacy at the same time. So.
I think it's a really good example when we go to crypto events and we're trying to meet someone for the first time in person, when we only met them on, like, let's say Telegram, and they have unknown peak on their profile, and you're just like looking around and it's like, hey, are you Max? So trying to figure out who this person is. And I think we've been touching a lot on decentralization, but I want to ask you, what is decentralization? What is decentralization from your perspective?
Yeah, I think decentralization is when things operate on their own. And for us at the foundation, people have asked, what does success look like at the foundation, 100 years from now? And I said, 100 years from now, true decentralization for our network would be that I'm unemployed because I no longer need to play a role. My team doesn't need to play a role in having to play such a heavy hand. And it's why we have huge, amazing initiatives like Filecoin Orbit. Is right now we're hosting these large ecosystem events, but our goal is at some point maybe a company or a number of companies will come in. They see the value of continuing to support these community events, and they're able to just go off on their own. And at some point, we don't need to play a role. It will just happen. But these things take time for us to get there, and we definitely understand that. So one of our main goals is to give resources and to set that in stage so that we can move towards that. But decentralization can also mean, decentralization of data, decentralization of knowledge, like we talked about prior, decentralization of assets, like the way people are parking their money in different ways after banking failures. So that's a lot of why I think the internet is such a great place, and why I'm such a big believer in all the companies that are building in Web3 that really are trying to look for ways to get a more democratized, accessible internet for everyone.
Absolutely. And people can continue exploring Filecoin ecosystem, and I think the point here is to make sure Clara is unemployed. And Clara, just to finalize, we always ask to share a crazy story from a crypto space. You've been involved in crypto for long enough. I know you, I'm pretty sure you have a lot of these stories. Can you share something really crazy, wild with us that happened to you during your journey in crypto?
Yeah, I think one of my craziest stories was definitely hearing about this event called NFT Castle in Prague, and then also attending. So
NFT Castle already sounds interesting.
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys have heard of it before, but NFT Castle was started because there is a prince in Prague of the Czech royal family that was very passionate about NFTs and brought his entire family along. And so this conference is taking place in a huge castle in Prague where you just have anyone you can imagine. You had Sophia, the robot there. You had musicians. You had the head of legal for Salvador Dali's foundation. So it was a lot of these different kinds of people all together talking about the importance of NFTs and the Web3 community. And you might be wondering, well, why is this important to the royal family? Well, this particular royal family actually inherited a number of artifacts and paintings, and you can imagine all these historic works across Europe that are very, very expensive to maintain and open up. I actually learned for the first time how expensive it is to run a museum. And museums are really, places you think about for art to be shown to the rest of the world. And unfortunately, for them, it was really, really expensive to figure out how to preserve these historic works. And we were talking to them about ways they could leverage Filecoin, IPFS, and NFTs to really help with that. So they created an NFT called Proof of Patronage, where you can actually have support of some art that has never been shown to the public, and they will actually put a physical portrait of you in the castle when you provide this proof of patronage. So there's all kinds of fun models that was experimented, but that was pretty crazy to me, was just never thinking about all these different spaces coming together, never thinking a royal family would be this interested in the blockchain space.
Is your portrait in a castle?
They emailed me about it a few weeks ago, and I haven't gone back to them, but...
Say, well, what was in the email? Please come back, pick up your portrait.
No, they were saying, like, how is this frame? Like, are you good with us putting it up? They were trying to get my consent. And I was imagining if I wanted my painting in the castle, but...
Can I visit and see the paintings there?
Yeah, I think that was the model for their event. I mean, it's a great event. Highly recommend you guys explore. And the Lobowitz family that organizes NFT Castle, they're so friendly and so great. But they really do, you can see the heart they pour into showing the history of the castle, all the artifacts, the importance of artwork. And, NFTs are today's modern version of preserving art over time. And so if you own an NFT, you're actually likely already using IPFS and Filecoin. So we integrate with all the major NFT platforms as that storage layer. But it's fantastic to be able to see this really come alive in places like royal families of today. So
thank you, Clara, so much. So again, the message to community: let's make Clara unemployed. That means participate in Filecoin, take more
decentralize our technology,
decentralize Filecoin, and do visit the castle in Czech Republic to check out Clara's portrait.